Tracy? Okay, good afternoon. I'm going to officially call this meeting to order at 1:05. If I could please have a roll call.
Quarles? Here. Kokendorfer?
Here.
Gershenson? Here. Berman?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you. So before we move on to the approval of agenda, if we could all stand for a moment and say the pledge. Thank you. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So I need a motion for approval of the agenda. So moved by Quarles, seconded by Gershenson. All in favor? Aye. Passes. Now approval of the minutes from August 17th. Motion by Gershenson, seconded by Kokendorfer. All in favor? Aye. Approved. So next item on our agenda is announcements. I just want to take one moment to introduce myself and have my fellow commissioners on this committee introduce themselves as well. I'm Tom Berman. I'm Commissioner for the 5th District, which is comprised of the northern portion of West Bloomfield, Orchard Lake, Keego Harbor, Sylvan Lake, and the southern portion of Waterford. I am co-chairman of this ad hoc committee with Nancy Quarles. And, you know, from my perspective, it is our obligation to investigate and better understand our elections infrastructure. We all know that there were some issues that presented themselves this past primary election, and we're looking forward to speaking to each and every single one of you so that we can ultimately gather as much information as we can and ultimately be able to make an informed report back to the Board of Commissioners so that we can tackle this issue and hopefully prevent it from ever happening again in the future. Nancy?
Good afternoon. I'm Nancy Quarles. I am the Commissioner for District 17, which includes the cities of Southfield, Oak Park, and Lathrop Village. Similar to Commissioner Bergman said, our whole intent is to make sure our elections, along with you, are moving smoothly and find out things that we can do to help in the election process. The intent is to take this information, build a report, and so that we all can be informed on what's needed for 2020. Because as we all know, in the general election, it's completely different rules, so we'll be looking at moving forward for the 2020 primary. And thank you for coming out.
I'm Marcia Gershenson. I represent District 13, which is parts of Bloomfield Township, parts of West Bloomfield, and parts of Farmington Hills. I want to thank everybody for coming out. It's so important to us to hear from everyone. We don't want to have any voters disenfranchised. We want to hear from you. And I also want to commend my local clerks that I've worked with. I know, and the poll workers. I know how difficult this was and how many of you stepped up. And of course, our election department, which I've worked with for over 10 years and have had positive experiences with. So we're really looking to get your feedback. I hope you're all comfortable to let us know what your experiences were.
And good afternoon, everybody. My name is Adam Kokendorfer. I represent District 15. That includes both Rochester and Rochester Hills. And I echo those comments, and again, want to thank each one of you for coming out today. There is nothing more important than free, fair, and efficient elections. I know there are some frustrations by some. We want to make sure that does not happen again, that everyone has access to a quick ballot so they can make their voices heard, and we hope that you make your voices heard here today. Thank you very much.
Excellent. Thank you, Commissioners. So for those of you who don't have an agenda in front of you, there will be an opportunity for local clerks as well as public comment. We have sign-up sheets up here. Some of you have already signed. I believe we have some in the back if you have not signed and you want to make sure that you have an opportunity to speak. please sign up so that you have your opportunity to be heard. Next on our regular agenda, we have a presentation from the county clerk in the elections division. We need a motion to hear this item.
I'll make it.
All right. All right, all in favor? Aye. So Lisa and Joe?
All right, thank you, Commissioners, for the opportunity to be here today and present our side of what occurred on the August 7th, 2018 primary election. Let me, by way of background, just bring you up to date on election statute and how this process works. So the ballot ordering is governed by promulgated rule, and for general elections, the office is required to provide one ballot for every registered voter as of the close of registration. For a primary election, a state primary election, the office is required to provide a number equivalent to the corresponding primary. So if we're talking a presidential year, we go back 4 years to the corresponding presidential. Gubernatorial year, back 4 years to the corresponding gubernatorial primary, in this case 2014, and increase that turnout by 25%. Okay, that's the statutory or promulgated rule guidance we get. For special elections, local elections, school districts, mayor and council, the discretion is established that the local clerk will establish the quantity based on past experiences with that type of election. The statute, Michigan election law, also sets the individual responsible or the entity responsible with paying for the production and authorization of those ballots at the county. So the expense of providing ballots to all of the various precincts in this county rests here at the county level. So let me begin by just assuring everyone that the statute was followed. In fact, not only was the statutory minimum followed, but the statutory minimum was exceeded in every single instance, okay? Elections, in the most simplistic terms, elections are like planning a wedding without knowing how many guests are going to arrive, okay? So that's essentially what we are tasked with doing at these various elections, and our local clerks as well. Oakland County last had a ballot shortage in 2006. This was before my time and before Clerk Brown's time. This was under then County Clerk Ruth Johnson. And there's no Board of Commissioners report or anything back then to look back on. However, it was a topic of a half-hour news program that aired on PBS regarding that ballot shortage, and the staff that's here that was working in the office in 2006 can certainly attest to their experience in the 2006 ballot shortage. I was hired in January of 2007 to sort of right the ship, if you will. We had a division that suffered from poor morale, complete lack of technology, clearly wasn't following the law because they ran out in November of 2006, which was a general election. And now, I believe that our division is a model department that other counties around the state aspire to be. So, as I mentioned, the ballot order was required to be based on the 2014 election plus 25%. Well, immediately we realize 2014, not a good starting point. 2014, that election was a completely different dynamic than the election we were facing August 2018, right? Top of the ticket, 2014, there were not contested gubernatorial primaries on either side. Open congressional seats, etc. 2014, bad example. So we prepared a document which looked at the 2014 plus 25%, so we knew what our statutory minimum was. Then we also included 2010. Because up until 2018, this August election, 2010 was our highest voter turnout election. So we started with 2010, and we increased and padded the turnout numbers in 2010. But taking it a step further, we also added a column for 2016, recognizing that between 2010, 2012, 2014, et cetera, a number of changes could have occurred. New subdivisions, precinct boundaries changed geographically. And so if in 2016 voter turnout happened to be higher in a given precinct than 2010, we used the 2016 number as the baseline and expanded from there. Now, when we put together this ballot order, we do it precinct by precinct, split by split. And what a split is that you may have a precinct where there are 2 county commissioners elected in that precinct. And maybe if there's 2,000 voters in that precinct, 1,000 may be voting for Commissioner A and 1,000 may be voting for Commissioner B. Or more likely a school district split. Some may be voting on a school proposal, some may not. So we went through every single precinct, every single split within a precinct, and began the process of allocating ballots. Now, when all is said and done, we ordered 434,712 ballots for a turnout that was 323,891. So we ordered more ballots than we had voters on Election Day. There was a survey response that referenced something about a statement I made at a municipal clerks conference about something to the effect of anticipating a turnout at 65% higher or something than the 2010 election. That's not correct. The statement that I made in preparing municipal clerks from around the state for this election was that this election, 2018, will look like 2010 and likely seeing turnout around 25 to 30%. Okay, so that's the statement that was made at the municipal clerks conference. The typical primary turnout in this county, 17 to 19%. So we recognized that turnout would be higher. Now, as I mentioned, we do this precinct by precinct. We don't just say, hey, we're going to order enough for 50% of the registered voters in every precinct. You cannot do that. I mean, you can do that if you're going to do 100% or 90%. You can throw a number out like that and say, well, we're going to order 100%. Well, then you're not going to have any issue. But if you throw out a number like, well, we're going to order enough ballots for 50% of the turnout in every precinct, you're going to have problems. And we would have had problems in this past election because there were many precincts that were in the mid to high 50s, some in the low to mid 60s. So even if we would have thrown out a percentage like 60% and say, well, why don't we order 60%? We have a budget to order, say, 60%. Why not throw out a number like that? Can't do that. Because even in that instance, it would not have satisfied all of the precincts in this county. You have to look, unless you're going to order 100%, you have to look at this line by line. So we put together that allocation, and then we communicated that allocation to our municipal clerks. And immediately thereafter, our office began being contacted by some of these municipal clerks who said, hey, look, I've had changes since 2016, boundary changes. I've reduced precincts. I've added precincts. I've shifted voters. The allocation that's on the order form is not sufficient for my community. Now, I'm not going to use any names, but I'm going to read you some examples. Okay, so here's an example where a clerk contacts us and says, you know, can you revisit these numbers? We went through an overhaul of our precinct configurations and reduced the number of precincts substantially, to which our office replied, now how did you reduce precincts? Did precinct 28 get merged into precinct 13 or 27 get merged into precinct 2? I mean, was there a way to have the votes cast in a previous election trail those voters? And the response was no, that they wiped the map clean and completely redrew the boundaries. To which we said, send us your order, we're adjusting the numbers, and we'll have a revised sheet over to you shortly. Another email. Please increase my order for precinct 3 ballots by 100. We moved voters from precinct 1 to precinct 3. Here's another one, where the clerk initially reaches out saying, if we feel we're going to go over the allocated amount, can we do so? We have 2 precincts that we feel we need 50 more ballots for. To which we replied, let us know how many ballots you want and in which precincts. Joe and I will go over the sheet and your request for additional ballots. The clerk's subsequent reply was, we were able to stay within the allocated quantities. Final one, clerk had revised numbers, attached as our ballot order. We've increased the, quote, approved ballot quantity for 7 of our precincts. The clerk will be sending a separate email explaining this reason for these increases. To which our reply was, good morning, I've received your ballot quantity sheet, and Joe said that he spoke with blank about the additional ballots, which is great. I'll submit the order as you sent it. So to somehow insinuate in some of these survey responses that this ballot order was done in a vacuum and that the comments and feedback from local clerks was ignored, as you can see evidenced by these emails that I just read you, is false. We had numerous email exchanges. Those were examples of some of them where we do take feedback from our local clerks. This ballot order procedure has been the same procedure that's been in place for years. There's another survey response that said, this is the first time we ever ordered ballots like that. So I brought along 2016 November, 2016 August, 2014 November, 2014 August, 2012 November, 2012 August. This is not the first time that we follow this ballot ordering process. It's the first time in my 12 years that we've run into a shortage, but it's not the first time that we've ordered ballots this way. And so anyone who states in their survey response that this is somehow some new way of doing things, that's a false statement. Now, when the ballot order sheet goes out, we ask our local clerks to provide numbering for these various ballots, okay? In some counties, they dictate the numbering. They're getting 1,000 ballots, they say it's going to be 1 to 1,000 in every, in that precinct, and 1 to 500 in the next precinct. We provide our clerks with the flexibility to assign their own numbering ranges, whatever numbering configuration they want, to their various precincts. After they do that, we ask the clerks to tell us how many ballots they want folded. Now, you may have read in these survey responses absentee ballots and precinct ballots. Okay, there's no such thing when you're ordering ballots as absentee ballots. A ballot is a ballot is a ballot. They can order ballots as a convenience at their own expense, at about 6 cents each, to have these ballots pre-folded. Okay, all that means is that as a convenience to that municipality, again, something that other counties don't offer that we do, because we listen to our local clerks, that these folded ballots are placed by them directly in the absent voter envelopes and sent out. There also is a test ballot allocation. You may have read in these surveys about test ballots. We allocate ballots for testing, okay? We provide the programming, we provide the ballots. The local clerks are required to do logic and accuracy testing. In other words, they put together a chart of predetermined results. Commissioner A is going to get this many votes, Commissioner B is going to get this many votes, Commissioner C is going to get this many votes. The ballots are marked accordingly. They're fed through the tabulators to make sure that the county did not have an error in its ballot programming. Now, we send enough, I'm going to put it in quotes, test ballots, where there are enough left over. Those are ballots. They can be used on Election Day. Just like ones that were pre-folded for convenience purposes, they're still a ballot. All right. So then around mid-July, clerks begin contacting members of my staff or myself requesting additional ballots. Some requests were detailed, some requests were not. Okay, so here's an example. Hello, Joe, I have 5 ballots remaining, precinct 1, and I think I need more. Okay, there's no specific request. Here's another one. Good afternoon, just a heads up, I've broken into my precinct 6 precinct ballots. okay? And then here's one example that was more detailed. Hello, just wondering what the status is on ordering additional ballots. I have 3 precincts I'm concerned about. They list the precincts. I'd like to get an additional 50 ballots for these precincts. So clerks began, as I've just indicated to you, communicating with our office in a number of different ways, some detailed and some not, about what they perceived as a shortage of folded ballots, indicating that AV requests were up. On July 25th, I sent an email to every clerk in this county letting them know that the county would be evaluating the ballot allocations along with their requests and be placing a supplemental order. We wanted to wait until the end of July to get the largest perspective possible. We're not going to be placing multiple orders a day, multiple orders a week. It's best to get the largest perspective possible across all of the precincts, all of the jurisdictions in this county, and place one order with the printer for that entire supplemental order. Now, I recognize that this is a stressful time for local clerks, and perhaps our office could have done a better job communicating that, although I did share with you the July 25th email. But I want to remind you that we have our own responsibilities in statute, and we were out during this time doing training of election inspectors, both regionally as a convenience to our clerks at their request, or here in our office. And so you're thinking, well, Joe, that's probably a bad time to do the training. Why did you pick then? Well, it's not me picking it. It's outlined in statute. 90% of what our office does is a shall or must, with a statutory deadline when it has to be done. Unlike other departments in this county, where they may do it this week, they may do it next week, in the end it really doesn't matter, doesn't apply to our office. Everything that we do is outlined in statute. So what we did was, we then contacted the Secretary of State's office, and we obtained this absent voter report for every single precinct in this county. Because, as I mentioned, some clerks had reached out to us indicating that there was a potential that they were going to have a ballot shortage. They were dipping into their flat ballots. Others did not. So we had this report produced by the Secretary of State, because apparently we don't have the ability to produce it ourselves. And so for every single precinct in this county, we have a listing of all the applications for absentee ballots that were sent, returned, ballots sent, and ballots returned. We reviewed that for every single precinct in this county, along with the requests that came in from individual jurisdictions. And on July 31st, we placed a very large supplemental order with the print vendor. 19 jurisdictions contacted us, 39 appear in the supplemental order. So we ordered for 20 additional jurisdictions that never reached out and requested additional ballots from our office. When we circulated that, on July 31st, when I circulated that supplemental order with the local clerks, here's some samples of the responses I got back. Joe, you're awesome. Thank you. Okay, great. So apparently they were satisfied with the supplemental order. Next email says, Joe, for precinct 10, I'm hoping we can get an additional 100 ballots. It's not worth panic to run out. I said, I'll take a look and let you know. She said, please, please, please. I'm panicking. And then I said, I'm having someone deliver 100 ballots to you. Next one was a clerk who reached out, got the supplemental order, had concerns with the supplemental order. Those ballots were delivered to that clerk by me personally. Everybody wants to Monday morning quarterback how this ballot order process went, because it's easy to do, right? You can sit back now and say, oh yeah, well you should have done this or you should have ordered that. Right, yeah. Nobody, after I'm done talking and Lisa's done talking to the local clerks, not one of them can come up here with a straight face and tell you that they knew what the voter turnout was going to be to the percentage in all of their precincts with a straight face. Because they wouldn't be sitting behind me, they'd be on a beach in Aruba spending their lottery winnings, because they'd be predicting lottery numbers rather than voter turnout in precincts. So it's easy to Monday morning quarterback this. So let me Monday morning quarterback it. If everybody knew but us what their exact turnout percentage was going to be, and everybody knew they were going to be short, they knew they were going to be short, they knew how many ballots they were going to be short, they knew that the county was not supporting them. Here's the election officials accreditation guide that every local clerk is required to read and take an open book exam. Let's look at Chapter 11. Chapter 11 talks about what to do if you anticipate a ballot shortage in the precinct. And what does it do? What does it say? It talks about photocopying ballots and having them prepared in the event that there's a shortage. So if everybody saw this coming, then why weren't we better prepared? There's information in your survey responses about QVF, which stands for Qualified Voter File, EPB, Electronic Poll Book. You may have saw references to a card swiper not working. None of that equipment has to do with our office. So anytime you read survey responses about the Qualified Voter File system, the Electronic Poll Book, the card swiper, those are state systems, state hardware, have nothing to do with our office. Some clerks experienced issues, as you may have seen in the survey, with their high-speed tabulation equipment. The manufacturer initially attempted to blame paperweight, but I know for a fact that's not the case. We did extensive testing on 70-pound and 80-pound paper stock. The issue involves a 4-inch black piece of plastic that was manufactured by Canon. And the manufacturing of this, I believe, is inappropriate for the size ballot that we were using. The angles on it are too sharp. I've been in discussions with this company at a conference I just got back from, discussing about the need to switch this part out in advance of November. So I want you to be assured that we're already beginning discussions to address that issue. I know my reputation in the county, the state, and frankly the country. I train new county clerks on how to be county clerks. I train new municipal clerks on how to be municipal clerks. I just got back from a national conference where they asked me to speak because I'm deemed an expert on the acquisition of new voting systems. So I just want you to all to be clear that myself and my staff, we all know what we're doing. You're all in very capable hands. There is no crystal ball. Okay, I do not have a crystal ball in my office that allows me to predict turnout. Washtenaw County, our neighbor. Now, they didn't experience a shortage. I talked to their county election director. He said, well, we ordered 80%. Okay, they had precincts with 3% turnout and 4% turnout. 77%, 76% of ballots in some of those precincts thrown in the trash. Now, we can do that here. In fact, Lisa and I appeared at your Finance Committee budget hearing and asked for appropriation to be able to print 100%. Again, if we have the money to do it, we'll print 100%. There will be tremendous amounts of waste in some precincts. But maybe that's a better alternative than running out. This happens all over the state every single election. Okay, this is not new. In fact, the state sent out information to clerks on election day and said, hey, counties all over the state are running short. Here's the procedures to follow. I sent correspondence to the clerks the day before, the morning of the election, letting them know what to do in the event of a ballot shortage. We have one of the most decentralized election systems in this entire country. We're the only state that is this decentralized. The system only works when we are a well-oiled machine, from the state to the county to the locals and back. The communication has to flow in all directions at all times, or this decentralized system doesn't work. In 46 states, it's just run at the county level, and that's it. Okay? In this election, looking back, it looks like probably there could have been better communication in every direction of this process. And I'll own the part of it that I need to own, but I'm not going to own all of it. Some of you talked about the ability to recruit younger election inspectors, and I suggested at the Finance Committee meeting that you all create a grant program. Local clerks can apply for grants from the county and use those funds to recruit younger poll workers, Facebook ads, posters at community colleges, etc., as a means of you assisting the locals in recruiting poll workers, as that was mentioned by a commissioner at the Finance Committee. Last thing I'm going to say, and then I'll be done, and that is, and you will hear this from the Board of Canvassers, some of these shortages were perceived shortages. The election workers did not know there were ballots in that precinct, in that ballot bag. Here's an example of an email we received from one of the election workers. And it says, as we ran out of ballots, we were instructed to have voters write their votes on photocopies or blank paper. At the end of the day, unused ballots suddenly appeared in the ballot box. They were not included on the poll book and no idea where they came from. Why were they not used when we ran out of ballots? The chairperson was going to throw them away, and after I stated you can't do that, the ballots stayed in the ballot box. We have 520 precincts in this county. Some folks ran low. That's stressful. Some folks were worried they were going to run low. That's stressful. But there was a limited number of precincts out of 520 that had a legitimate shortage. I will also say that, there are requests for 100%. Welcome to the new normal, right? The 24-hour news cycle, the reporting of constant tweets and whatnot on the national news has really geared and engaged the public, right? So our clerks approached us and said, look, we want 100% in the primaries like we get in the general. And 21 of them signed on to a letter that we presented to the Finance Committee requesting 100% funding. And we certainly hope that that will be one of the solutions that comes out of your report. And I'll turn it over now to our county clerk, and then we'll take questions at the end.
Thank you, Joe. Oh, am I on? Okay. Well, I'd like to begin by apologizing to anyone who feels I threw them under the bus. I responded to questions from the press about some of the things I saw and experienced on Election Day. In no way did I express that every clerk, community, or precinct was the same. I don't want to call anyone out, and I want to move forward. But my integrity and competency, as well as that of my staff, have been called into question, and for that, I must defend. Some have said the county should have known, and others say the local clerks know. I agree with both. Local clerks have the pulse of their community, but we only know if you tell us. I know some of you requested more ballots after mailing out a large number of absentees. I agree my staff should have communicated better regarding the supplemental order. I completely understand your stress and anxiety over that. And again, we are committed to improving communication. But please remember, it works both ways. And if you have a problem with my staff, don't hesitate to contact me. Joe doesn't have a crystal ball, but I think he did his best to determine quantities and went above and beyond by asking the state to run a report on AVs. When he saw the results, he put in a supplemental order for many of you that didn't even ask for it. On Election Day, I went to a precinct that others were telling me was struggling. The local clerk had not called my office for any assistance, but I was getting phone calls and text messages from people. So I drove there after dropping off some ballots somewhere else. When I arrived, I saw a line of voters waiting. And I asked the chair why she wasn't using the VAT. And sorry, I'm going to say VAT a few times. That stands for Voter Assist Terminal. That is, that you're nodding. Do you all know what it is already? Did Chris tell you? Okay, good. Excellent. Thank you. Good job, Chris. Okay. So the 88, yeah. So I asked the chair why she wasn't using the VAT, and she pointed out correctly that they didn't have the right paper. Never did I say that the TouchWriter, which is the brand name for ours, is for mass ballot production, but it is another voting booth and a Band-Aid that the other equipment vendors don't even have as an option to print blank ballots. And it turns out about 16 municipalities didn't order paper for the VAT, which not only means they couldn't print any blank ballots, but a voter with disabilities would not be able to cast their ballot independently. We ran a report on the VATs. Some communities didn't test their VAT before Election Day. Some didn't even turn it on Election Day. And I went through poll books, and one poll worker remarked, "We don't have a printer for the VAT." Next, Joe was printing ballots while my staff and I drove around the county delivering them. Not something that I would ever expect to have to do on Election Day, but that's where we were. At one of my stops, I ran in to a quiet, empty precinct. No voters in sight. I ran to the workers, I was anxious for them, and told them I had their ballots. They said they just delivered the ballots. I asked who, because I thought maybe there was a mix-up in my office. They responded, the local clerk. I'm not using names here. And they said, look, and the chair walked me over to the ballot bag where an unopened pack of ballots, still in the clear wrap, lay along with other ballots. Now, the poll workers felt bad. They felt bad that I had driven all the way over there, and they said, you know, we'll still take them, but they didn't need them. Those ballots could have been printed for someone else who needed them. And according to the ballot summary from that precinct, those ballots delivered by the local clerk were from the supplemental order, that second order that Joe talked about. They weren't delivered in the morning. They were at City Hall in the morning. The ballots I delivered were not included in the ballot summary because, one, they weren't numbered, and two, not one of them was used. Ballot summaries from other precincts in different municipalities tell a similar story. The ballots we printed weren't used, and the supplemental order wasn't delivered with the original order, and sometimes never even found their way to the precinct. Let me stress, this is not what happened everywhere, but it did happen. Other things of interest in the poll books were early morning lines from user error with the tabulator, poll workers who forgot to remove the tab off of the top of the ballot before inserting into the tabulator. Also, I saw that a couple of precincts in different municipalities ran out of applications to vote. That tells me that the local wasn't expecting that high of a turnout as well. The amount of spoiled ballots in some precincts had a huge impact. I spoke with Chris Thomas, and I would say he, besides Joe, is the most respected election administrator in this state. He was the former head of the Bureau of Elections for Michigan. He's been appointed to national groups, and he recently retired. But I called him and I asked him, what's normal for spoilage in this kind of election? He told me 1 to 2%. We had one precinct that had 75 spoiled ballots, and another had over 22% spoiled. And believe me, there were many with spoileds in double digits. Sorry, but that leads to a shortage. And some had voters go through 5 ballots before getting it right. I also saw in the remarks pages a high number of absentee voters who surrendered their ballots at the precinct, and some voters who, after spoiling and learning that they couldn't cross party lines, left angry without casting another ballot. And yes, turnout was high. One precinct's numbers that I looked at had 176 ballots cast in 2010. And remember, Joe talked about that was the year that we looked back because we thought that would be most similar to this year. So 176 ballots cast in 2010. 874 ballots this time. That's more than 4 times higher. Now, I'm only going to name one municipality because it stood out as doing an awesome job. And it doesn't mean they're the only ones that did an awesome job, but in looking through the remarks in the poll books, over and over, I read that so-and-so spoiled their ballot, so one Democrat and one Republican helped them with their ballot. And I don't even know if she's here, but I want to applaud Sue from Farmington and her poll workers for a great job. That's not to say others didn't do the same, but they had it beautifully in their remarks in the poll book. I know it was a stressful day for everyone, and I'm sure November will be busy too. But as a reminder, as Joe already said, the law requires us to order 100% for November. I did ask the Finance Committee of the Board of Commissioners to let me have more money in my election supplies budget for even years to provide voter education, and so that if you want 100%, it can be ordered for the 2020 primary. I realize that may result in waste. For some, as turnout this time ranged from 7.73% to 64.59%. But I would like to leave it up to you, local clerks, as to how much we order, so that's something that you're not stressed about. I saw in the surveys that some clerks are disappointed in me or questioned why I didn't rely on Joe. I kind of laughed when I read that. I relied on Joe and my staff 100%, as all of us have. It was surprising to hear some of the comments made by local clerks when not one ever contacted me. I can't understand that if you thought my employees were doing you wrong, why wouldn't you call or email me? I did ask Joe to send me emails that he received regarding ballot orders. He read you some of them. And he gave me a stack that I've gone through. And I didn't see a no in any of them. If you do have emails, I'm speaking to local clerks, if you do have emails saying otherwise, I ask that you share them with me. We did discuss how communication could have been better, as Joe mentioned, but if you think Joe should be fired, tell me right now, because I know 82 county clerks who would hire him in a second. To those that have regretted signing the letter, and I know some of you have shared that with Joe, I wonder if you will do that as publicly as the letter was used. And I know, as some of you have also shared with me, and I thank you for your honesty, your support, and friendship, that this is being used as a political platform to run against me. To that, I say that is wrong to do to the voters. As election administrators, we need to help voters feel confident in the process, ensuring them that their vote does count and that they do have access to the ballot. And moving forward, my biggest concern is the voters. I am sincerely sorry for any voter that was upset or had to wait or couldn't wait any longer, and to the poll workers who had to appease those voters. I don't want a single voter to feel disenfranchised, and I hope that we have an incredible turnout in November. There will probably be lines in November, but it won't be for a lack of ballots. And as I have asked the commissioners for an increase in my budget, I hope our municipalities will increase their clerks' budgets to allow them to buy more voting booths and electronic poll books if needed, and to hire more poll workers and to increase the pay of the poll workers. They work a long, hard day. I have often said that Oakland County has some of the best municipal clerks in the state, and I truly believe that. You are dedicated public servants who are passionate about your work. I hope that we can work past this and learn from it. And Joe and I are happy to answer any questions.
Okay, thank you for that. I know I have a number of questions, but I'm going to defer my first question to, I saw your hand raised first, Adam.
No, I just want to say, first off, thank you very much for both of you for being here today. I know both of you have spent a lot of time investigating these issues, and we really do appreciate it. I do have questions simply about the processes, just to make sure that I understand our internal processes. But after I heard that presentation, I want to back up a little bit. You know, it strikes me as somebody new to this that this entire process, at the end of the day, depends on open communication and on cooperation between the county and the local clerks, and a strong working relationship between those two. And so after I heard that presentation and the tone of portions of it, I have to ask that question: how do we move forward? How do we repair that essential relationship given what we just heard?
And I think that's an excellent question. For me, I think part of it is my request for more money in my budget. If I can take stress away from them for that, at least that part of Election Day on our even years, I think that's a good place to start. As far as communication goes, I would hope that, again, and I think I said it, that if they ever have a problem with anybody ever has a problem with my staff, to please contact me. If they feel that my staff is ignoring their request, to please contact me. Communication is a two-way street. And in going over all of this, Joe and I talked about it. I did look at the emails that he provided me, and for part of it, I could understand where anxiety would grow. I put myself in the place of a local clerk, and where maybe I would be anxious if I'm waiting to hear what that supplemental order is going to be and that sort of thing. So we've talked about how that can be better. But again, if we're doing that 100%, that's one less thing that we have to worry about as well. I did tell one of our local clerks, she has a very unique precinct, and that if she wanted 110%, to just let me know. But I think that with communication, everything is a two-way street. So we're committed to, even if we don't get that money, which I hope that will be granted. I bring in I don't want to swear, a lot more than my budget is supposed to. And all I'm asking is that I keep a little bit more of that in my division.
Yep.
And I already did everything I was supposed to do for the budget and take it out of deeds and all that kind of stuff. But we're committed to communication. I hope that our local clerks are. I know we all want to move forward. We've all had a very good working relationship, I think, and I know Joe has, up until this point. And I think that there was a lot of stress that happened, that a lot of people were overwhelmed, and I'm hoping that we all can just learn, like I said, learn from it and move forward.
Yeah, Commissioner, I'll just say this. Look, it's a great point, and we're going to move forward. I mean, I consider a lot of the folks in this room not only to be a colleague, but a personal friend. But I just want to be clear that I feel compelled to defend myself and certainly state my position, as up until this point, I've remained fairly quiet. And so I respect their positions. I hope after today they respect mine, and we'll move forward. There's not going to be any hard feelings here or any ability to move forward. Like I said, a lot of these folks are not only colleagues but friends, and we'll move forward as we need to into November.
Commissioner, can I just ask one process question, then I'll defer to the others?
Before you ask that process question, if I just take a moment just to address that answer, understanding your compulsion to defend yourself, I just want to make it very clear to the clerk's office as well as to all of our local clerks that it's not this committee's obligation or objective to point fingers and to pit you folks against each other. It's our obligation and our mission to learn from what happened and to ensure that we put the necessary mechanisms in place, whether that's adding more dollars, and I have some questions around that, and or training, development, communication, whatever it may be. But it's our duty here to try to find out what happened, what transpired, and how we can help the process moving forward. Because I don't see this as an us versus them, local versus county issue. We're all on the same team to ensure that our voters have access to the ballot in a timely fashion.
Can I respond to that as far as your comment with the money? I agree, and I mean, I love that Chris calls me the most fiscally conservative Democrat he knows. I don't like wasting taxpayer dollars, but there is a balance that we have to have here. And to think that if we printed 100% for a precinct that didn't even have 8% turnout, I mean, thinking of all those ballots that just go, hopefully at least in the recycle bin, is hard to deal with. I don't think my solution has never been just to throw money at a problem, that's the way to solve it. But I think that also that the clerks need to have a level of comfort. Maybe they won't all ask for 100%, and I hope that they would take the time, like Joe did, precinct by precinct and split by split, to say, you know what, yeah, I've never had more than 12% turnout in this one. That would be silly to get 100, I need X. But I would at least like to have that ability to give them that comfort. And then, I mean, again, for me, I think had we had the money, because we couldn't have printed 100% this time, and I'm not saying that's the reason why we didn't, but had we printed 100%, and you look that we had overall 34% turnout, now we had spoilage and all that sort of thing, but you're still talking about, I'll be very generous and say more than half, right, would end up in the recycle bin. And that's hundreds of thousands of dollars literally in the trash. So it is hard to deal with that. And then I would have been hit with, I wasted taxpayer dollars.
So Lisa, and not to interrupt, but I think this is probably more of a finance committee discussion. But nonetheless, I just want to make one comment, and from what my understanding is with respect to your fiscal year's budget, which is coming to a close here shortly, and I understand that, what it sounds like is there's a suggestion that the Board of Commissioners didn't allocate enough resources to buy enough, and I think you still have a surplus in your budget that you could
that's because we haven't paid for that yet. We haven't paid for our ballots yet.
Let's deal with that issue.
Yeah,
But I'm not at all saying,
move
I'm not
on
at
from
all
that.
saying that the commissioners did not fully fund our line item. That's not what I'm saying at all, because we never would have thought to print 100%. So that's not what I'm saying at all. I want to make that very clear.
Fair enough, and I think we have a few process questions. I want to give you two an opportunity. Oh, sure.
Yeah, just one more, and I agree with Tom. I think it said the Oakland Press. We have no interest in finger pointing. This is about uncovering objective facts and making sure this doesn't happen again. My one process question was this: help me just understand. Let's say first week of July, you get an email from a local clerk, and they say, "Hey, I think I need X number more ballots." Walk me through that process of how you determine whether the county gives those ballots or not. What does the internal procedure look like?
Right, so as these individual requests began coming in, say early July, we began compiling those requests, responding to each individual who either contacted myself or a member of my staff, letting them know that we would be evaluating and placing a supplemental order later. So then what we did was in late July, we reviewed all of those 19 requests that clerks had made, some specific, some not, like I shared with you. And then we did our own internal review for folks that we didn't hear from after I sent a broadcast email out letting everybody know that we would be looking at a supplemental order. So then my staff and I, using data from the Secretary of State's office regarding absentees, regarding the feedback in the email that was specific that we received from local clerks, we used that data to then evaluate those requests.
Oh, who's next on the agenda? Is it canvassers?
We have Board
or-
of Canvassers,
Okay.
and we wanted to give our county clerk an opportunity to speak, and we have a number of questions, obviously, for you two. But we are going to limit the other agenda items, particularly because we have a lot of local clerks here. We're going to unfortunately have to limit your time to probably 3 or so minutes. And again, it's going to be an opportunity for us to gather information and listen to you as opposed to, engage in a question and answer session. But we may have a few questions. And then again, election workers and public comment will also be limited. I believe we'd like to, I know Nancy by 3:15. So just so you guys understand the timing.
Are you going to, the clerk and the director of election, are you going to be able to stay around? Because I would rather go through the rest of the hearings. Okay.
Oh, yeah,
Then
we're
I
not
can
going
come back
anywhere.
with the question.
Yeah, we'll stay here.
And if we have time to come back, because I do have a few questions. Is that okay? All right, fair enough.
That's a good point.
Fair enough. Okay, then we're going to move on to the second portion of our agenda. If I can have a motion. Nancy Quarles, support, seconded by Adam. All in favor, aye. So Board of Canvasser representatives, thank you for being here. I don't know if you folks have prepared statement or presentation? Excellent, thank you.
Would you just like me to read it?
Sure.
Okay. Thank you for inviting us here to share our experiences with the election. Little louder? Okay.
Pull the mic right in front.
Okay. First of all, we observed in several precincts voters who were forced to vote on a photocopy ballot or a blank piece of paper. During the canvass, we then discovered actual printed ballots unused in the ballot container that could have been used on Election Day. Also, ballot summary forms were not completed correctly. In some instances, they did not account for all the ballots delivered and unused. Voters who had completed applications to vote and were entered into the poll book had to be removed from the poll book because they were turned away. Unused blank ballots were discovered in several of these precincts. Batches of absentee ballots from one jurisdiction were not counted on Election Day as they should have been. We tabulated those ballots during the canvass. We discovered several instances of absentee voters who were issued a ballot from an incorrect precinct, and that caused precincts not to balance. The spoiled ballot count was significantly higher than normal in many precincts. Ballots printed by the county to cover the shortages on Election Day were delivered to the wrong precincts by local election officials in one jurisdiction. We were required to duplicate them onto the proper ballot during the canvass. Those are our main observations.
Does anybody here have questions for the Board of Canvassers? I guess my only question is, you mentioned a number of observations and issues. Was that widespread, or was that individual instances in specific precincts? Did you see all of those issues in multiple precincts, or were those all related to, one issue in one precinct and another in another?
Well, the way our canvass works is that we go through each precinct individually, so I may see something that my coworkers don't see. So I can't really say how widespread it was, but generally we saw these in more than one precinct.
Thank you. Thank you for your report.
You're welcome.
We can move on to the third item of our agenda, motion by Quarles, seconded by Gershenson. All in favor? Aye. So I believe we have, is this the local clerk sign-in sheet? Okay, excellent. If somebody could do me a favor and bring up that additional sheet, is that it? Okay. So the first person that has signed up to speak is Tina Barton, clerk of the City of Rochester Hills. You have a mic there working? All right, excellent. And if you could do your best to try to limit your comments to approximately 3 minutes or so. I'm not sure I'm necessarily putting you on the clock here.
All right. Thank you, Commissioners.
I
I
will.
appreciate that, and I thank you for the
Maybe I will.
seriousness that you're putting into this matter. So I appreciate that, and I thank you for your time today in the middle of the day that you came here to be with all of us. I'm going to try to read this as quickly as possible. On May 31st, I sent an email to the county, of which Joe actually quoted a little bit earlier, and again, that was on May 31st, that I was concerned about some of the numbers that we were looking at because I felt that we were in a very different political climate than we were 4 years ago, that parties were really pushing for turnout. There would be a third party listed, which may cause even more crossover confusion. And the last reason I stated is that several of the offices that had incumbents 4 years ago were now term limited and would be open seats, and it would drive more interest. In between that time, I had a conference call with my deputy and Mr. Roselle, and she's unable to be here today to be witness to that. Her father passed away, so I apologize for that. But before that, we had a conference call and the beginning of July, and I stated that I had concerns that I was running short on some of my ballots already, the folded ballots that we use for absentees. So I was told at that time to wait and contact him in the middle of July, which I did, and so on July 18th, I sent an email, and in that email was provided a list of every single precinct, all 32 of mine, what they had ordered for me and how many I had issued up to that point, and I highlighted the ones where at that point I already had precincts where I had issued all of my folded absentee ballots and had to issue my flat ballots that we would normally take to the precincts. So on July 20th, 2 days later, the response was, "We will be in touch soon." On July 25th, 1 week after stating I had issued all of my folded ballots that we use for absentees in some precincts and was using precinct flat ballots, Joe issued an email that his office would be looking at numbers by the end of the week and determined if we warranted more ballots or not. On July 30th, 12 days later, I reached out and asked if they would share with us what precincts that they had determined warranted more ballots. On July 31st, 13 days later, we were provided a list showing who would be getting more ballots. I responded to them 2 hours later and stated my concerns about quantities running low. And when I'm looking at that email here, I specifically stated questioning why no extra ballots were ordered for precinct 16, as well as precinct 6, 17, and 30. And 3 out of the 4 of the precincts I pointed out on July 31st, questioning why no additional ballots were ordered, were precincts that I had to request on election day that they actually print the ballots for me. On Thursday, August 2nd, 2 days later, I contacted them and said that no one had ever responded to my email. They responded and said that the answer was that they would print them at the county on election day if necessary. I was at the budget hearing where Clerk Brown read that response to me and stated to the commissioners at that time that my reply was, "Okay, thanks." Understand that there are a lot of different ways that "okay, thanks" can be said, and that was more of a resolve of "okay, thanks," because at that point it became evident I was not going to get more ballots in those precincts. On election day, I had to request that emergency ballots be printed for 4 of my precincts. The emails were not being acknowledged at that time, so I had to call the county to make sure that they were actually receiving them. Received great help from the staff at the elections division when I called, so I want to thank them for what they do for us when we call and how they respond. Please note that the additional ballots that clerks were requesting as early as the middle of July were not delivered until the afternoon before the election. That may sound reasonable, but understand that all of our election equipment and our secured ballots are already on rented U-Haul style trucks being distributed to all of our precinct locations. And again, I have 32. Again, there were several precincts that they didn't feel warranted more ballots, even though we requested them. Didn't understand there were some precincts I got a lot more ballots for, and I couldn't understand why I got ballots for those precincts and not the others. All right, beyond those additional ballots, we used all of our test ballots. I don't understand how we didn't see this coming. We've been hearing about a blue wave for months. Races within each party were hardly contested by having multiple current elected officials running for the same office. It was being reported record amounts of money. National political names were coming in. The political climate is charged right now. The SOS was reporting on August 1st that absentees were up over 200,000 statewide. MERS was reporting on August 2nd that they were on track for a historical turnout. So what has to change? And I'm skipping a lot of stuff because I got a whole lot more here. But what has to change is that there has to be respect and there has to be communication. This isn't personal and it is not political. This is about operating as a team and everybody on the team having an equal voice.
Thank you. I think she's done. Yeah, you feel free if you have something different than what you've already submitted to us from a communication perspective. And anybody here, if you'd like to submit that for the record as well, that would be fine. Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is Pam Smith, City of Farmington Hills. Yeah, you can come to the podium as well.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. All precincts. I was the one most evident in all of the news articles. My name was out there. We were in the media. So all precincts in Farmington Hills were affected by this shortage. For us, it was all about voter turnout in the precincts. Our absentees only experienced an 8% increase overall. At the end of the day, when all the totals are in. County to send out absentee ballots, use test ballots if we had to, but that would have been sufficient. That would have been sufficient if only a few communities had a precinctor there that ran out. But the bottom line is that the contingencies in place at the county level and our level were not sufficient. I mean, when we were being told that they could print ballots, I think it was the understanding, I talked to many clerks before election and on election day, that they could print ballots and send them out to us or deliver them for us to our precincts. When I called on election day, it was evident that the county was also a little flustered, and I asked when I called, which was not until about 3:30 in the afternoon, to request ballots, and they said that, I said, is this happening countywide? And I got the response, pretty much. So I think that the bottom line is that we did, and I acknowledge, the county had contingencies in place for us. They communicated that to us. We knew we had absentee ballots we could send out. I was one of the few that actually had leftover absentee ballots that I could send out, limited, but test ballots were limited. So in 20 out of 27 of our precincts, we more than doubled voter turnout. And I don't think anybody has a crystal ball that we could have said, yes, this was going to happen. The county couldn't predict that. I certainly couldn't predict that. 15 of our precincts exceeded the total ballot order. So, and I'm going by voters only. I'm not going by how many absentee ballots we actually issued, any that were spoiled. Just the votes alone in 15 precincts exceeded the ballot order. And that's with the additional 100 ballots that were ordered by the county after the fact, and what we call the absentees, which were folded. So I just want to put that out there. I'm not here to point any fingers. I've made this comment, and all of this information has been presented to my mayor, my council. I made a statement at our city council meeting, and I'm not here to point fingers, but I appreciate, I put my name on the letter for the county, for the 100% turnout, to budget for that. I think we can't look back. We can't keep looking back to determine what we need to do in the future. And frankly, I feel the same way, and I think all the clerks, we kind of got to this point where we were like, well, we don't want to waste money, we don't want to waste money, but guess what? I bet you these voters now that we're hearing from these voters aren't going to care that we're going to have to throw away 76% of the ballots in some precincts if they all have the chance to vote. All of these issues, and I had many, and many were on my staff's, or trying to handle this citywide shortage over 33 square miles in Farmington Hills. I didn't have the staff to do that. We were struggling to do that. But all of these issues would not have been there had there been enough ballots.
Thank you.
Can I just say a couple more things? I won't be long.
30 seconds.
Okay. I want to stress that I have a great relationship with Joe at the county, and that's not going to change. And I'm not blaming Joe. I don't think any of the clerks are blaming. We just want this, we need to come to some conclusions on how we can make this better. Also, when we say voters turned away, I keep hearing that term, but I don't want anybody to have the misconception that our workers are out there saying, nope, you have to leave. If voters felt like they couldn't wait, and we were the ones that had lines and people were waiting for a significant amount of time, they were absolutely told in every election and big elections, even when we have 20 people in line, at 8 o'clock, anybody in line at 8 o'clock will have the chance to vote. So I don't want that misconception when voters are turned away.
Thank you. Next up, I'm having a hard time reading this. Is this Sean? What is this? Is this Southfield Township? Or Sheila? Sharon.
Good afternoon, and thank you for allowing us to go ahead and speak. It's not mud on the wall, guys. I'm looking at this on a basis of being an informational meeting, try to put everything together to see how we can move forward and not have some of the same instances happen that have happened in the past. It's a learning experience all the way around. And so if we can do something better, that's the whole point. I sent in some information with regards to what happened in my jurisdiction. I have 10 precincts, of which I had to deliver out some of the AVs that I had, and there weren't a ton of those. And I also had 3 precincts where I delivered out because everything was gone as far as AV goes, so I resorted to test ballots and sent those out. I did not have to go ahead and print any ballots, and I kind of scratched my head over that because I did order paper for all of the pieces of equipment, the touch writers, and distributed that to polling locations so that they had paper in their printers, and I showed everybody how to go ahead and put the paper in so that it would feed through and so forth. But the copy machine is another problem. It accepts 17-inch wide paper, so if you try putting in something that's a little longer, I'm not sure I would get a full-fledged ballot. Okay, it's just the way it is. It's like trying to handle the FOIA request that we have currently now with 19-inch ballots and trying to run 19-inch ballots on a 17-inch machine. It just is not going to be viable unless we shrink things, and I don't know if I'm going to quite go that ritual. But anyway, I'm looking at it from a standpoint of there isn't a crystal ball. There is no happy answer here. But what the problem entails is precinct workers who are sitting there and then having to make a decision. When I told them, oh, by the way, when you get down to that last 100 ballots, you open up that last package and it's only 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon, you better give me a call because we're going to need to get you some ballots if you're still having a large turnout. Well, I did get those calls, and so they ended up with ballots that I had on hand or ones that I remarked on a basis of the test ballots that went out. Some of this stuff creates problems on a basis of the people who have to go ahead and look at everything afterwards when it comes to the canvas. They forget to mark numbers down. They forget to go ahead and things are coming to them with no numbers on them. You can't number a ballot if there's no stub to be able to be removed. So there's all kinds of issues that come along with this, and precinct workers aren't used to dealing with that kind of stuff. They're used to having enough ballots to go ahead and suffice and having some left over. They're used to having ballots if they have to turn around and duplicate if you're sending out your AVs to be counted at a polling location. They're used to dealing with people who spoil ballots, and trust me, it's one of those scenarios where you can't fix stupid, okay? If somebody doesn't understand, and I've had people where they've spoiled 3 ballots before they finally get it that they can't go ahead and cross over. I had one gentleman who went ahead and used 3 ballots. It wasn't a matter of crossing over, it was a matter of going ahead and marking down the side of the ballot where the barcoding is, so that every time it went in, it got rejected. Yet everybody else was able to vote their ballot except this one gentleman. People do strange things. I mean, it's just the way it is. It's an election, and you turn around and you deal with it. But election workers aren't geared for that kind of stuff. They're not geared for the fact that they've run out of ballots, that they've got to go ahead and tell people, you need to wait, or I'm waiting for ballots to get delivered, or you're not going to be able to vote. They don't know how to deal with those kind of things. And where it defaults to is the clerk. We go ahead and get hit with that. So we deal with it, and it's part of our job, and we take it on. But what we'd like to be able to do is all feel comfortable that when we're doing election, we're going to have enough supplies all the way around. So whatever you guys decide, whether it's moving forward and figuring things differently or spending the money so that we end up with more ballots than what we need, some happy medium has to be met. Maybe it isn't 25%. Maybe it's more like 50 or 60% that we order.
Thank you.
Okay? It doesn't have to be 100%. It has to be somewhere where it's manageable all the way around. Trust me, I don't like throwing things out that we've paid good money for, because you don't get it back.
Thank you for your comments.
Thank you.
Clerk from Bloomfield Township, I can't read. Cursive, apparently. Jan. Yes, yes.
Dan Roncelli.
Yes. Thank you.
Oh, is that bad? Well, good afternoon. Thank you for allowing us this opportunity. I am, in some ways, sorry that we have to be here because a number of us talked about meeting after the election, prior to all this happening, to talk with Joe and Lisa about these ballot quantities. Of course, we had a train wreck before that happened. And I think this train wreck was inevitably going to happen. So I just wanted to briefly talk to you about three things: lack of control, stress, and other counties. First of all, lack of control. The local clerks do not control the amount of ballots that we get. It's at the discretion of the county. We receive a spreadsheet filled out precinct by precinct, just like he explained, splits included, with how many ballots we are allocated. I don't have a choice in what I'm getting allocated. And the only choices I have is how many I have folded for AV for my convenience, and it is a great convenience to just put them in the envelopes folded, and how many ballots I send out to the precinct. And when I use all my AVs up, I have to, and you read this in an email, I have to borrow from Peter to save Paul. I'm shorting the precinct to establish more AVs. We did not run out of ballots at any precinct, but we had to deliver them to many precincts. And we always have a very large turnout in Bloomfield Township. This was our largest turnout ever for a primary election. But having to deliver ballots on election day causes a lot of stress, not only for the local clerks, but for all of their inspectors there. I would like to tell you that we did receive those ballots, the extra ballots that Joe supplied Monday afternoon, and everything I had was locked and loaded. And it's not just the equipment. My ballot container was sealed. I had a ballot receipt around all the ballots in the container with a specific seal. I had a list of the ballot quantities that were going there, the numbers. All of that was loaded into my electronic poll book in this poll book summary that the Board of Canvassers was talking about. It wasn't an easy thing to do at 2 in the afternoon to change over 32 precincts with any extra ballots that you received. So we took them out if needed on election day, and we did have to take them out in a couple of instances several different times. We are not set up as a printer at the township, and neither is the county. So I would like to have more control over my ballots, and I think you should have 100% of the ballots. Let me take control of how many I'm going to use and where the waste is going to come or not come. And for the general election, I would like 110% of my ballots. What Joe quoted is correct. That is the law, what he was talking about in the primary and the general, but those are the minimums. You can go well over those minimums. And when you're talking about money, if this is the problem here, money, we got to get over that. Number 2, stress. I can't tell you the stress that you go through as the clerk when your people are running out of ballots. You have to deliver them. You have to get your chief of police to send somebody out to the county. Those are all stressful things. And thank goodness the county could print us a couple of different precincts that we needed. But when we called back later for more, they couldn't even keep up with it. They ran out of stock. They're not set up to do mass quantity printing of ballots either. They're not printers. That's why you have a printer print all of these ahead of time, and you use them as needed. When the county prints your ballot, there's no stubs on them. So when you bring them to the precinct, you either have to renumber them with sticky notes on them, or they have to number them with sticky notes on them. And then you have to open up your electronic poll book, fill out the ballot summary, top and bottom. It's all checks and balances. It is not an easy thing to do. We, in one precinct, I got there when there were 6 people in line. By the time the 6th person got through, we had already entered it into the poll book, and we were ready to go.
I know you mentioned having 3 points, so I just want to make sure you get to your 3rd point.
I do.
Thank you.
All right, so even the county wasn't able to keep up with the mass printing. It's just, they're not capable of doing that. 3rd, other counties. I don't know that we're a model county when it comes, I know we're not a model county when it comes to ballots. I spoke with clerks from 6 counties: Wayne County, Genesee County, Macomb County, Kent County, Washtenaw County, Ingham County. None of them, not one of them, has ever had to beg for ballots, okay? They get blank spreadsheets and they fill in their quantities. In Wayne County, their printer makes suggested quantities in a spreadsheet, and in 26 years, one clerk said to me, she's never been denied more ballots when she needed them. Same thing with Genesee, Macomb, Kent, Washtenaw, and Ingham. I think it was Washtenaw, they ordered 80%, but they still could have had more if they wanted them. I don't want to beg anymore for ballots. I just want my ballots. I want to run the election. I don't want the anxiety. Thank you.
Thank you. Courtney Hanson, City of Novi.
there, I am Courtney Hanson from the City of Novi. I'm the city clerk, and I just want to start with letting the county know that I have the utmost level of respect for what you guys have to do and the majority of the responses that we got from you. We do work as a close team. One thing that's been mentioned is the communication, and that was one of the frustrating things that I experienced was I started asking for more ballots July 3rd and kept getting postponed. Check back next week. So I check back, okay, check back next week. And we went through that a few times, and I just kind of relied on the county, sorry, got nervous, relied on the county that we would kind of have more of a say when they placed that final order. And that's kind of where I got frustrated was they did place the final order for us, however, we didn't get a say. So there were precincts that I would have appreciated more ballots at that point, but didn't get to have a say. Overall, in Novi, we've got 22 precincts. We ended up sending out to 19 of our precincts our leftover absentee ballots, our test ballots, and we printed to our touch writer, in addition to 8 precincts getting ballots printed from the county. So we were one of the extremes. I think one of the things that saved us was my foresight in not knowing what I was going to get at the last minute. I ordered a lot of touch writer paper for that VAT machine. 5 of our precincts ran out of everything and had to print to that. So pretty much everything else I think I would have commented on has been said, so I won't rehash that. But thank you for the opportunity to speak.
Thank you for your comments. Sharika Hawkins from, is that Southfield? Southfield.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you to the board, and I do want to start out by saying I do have a professional and personal respect for our county clerk and our director of elections. But I was the city that was affected the most adverse. I have 36 precincts in the whole city, 26.82 square miles within the city of Southfield. So we duplicated over 1,100 ballots. So I can speak a little longer than 3 minutes, I hope.
I'll help you.
About
I'll help
the
you out a
issue.
little bit.
So much like some of my other colleagues, just collectively in Oakland County, our clerks have over 700 years of experience. So this isn't our first rodeo for me. This was my 15th election that I administered. I think there's a great sense of, we rely on the county for a lot of things. When we started to see the ballot shortage, I did not send an email to the county. I had one phone call saying that my ballots were a little short, and then they assured us that we would get more ballots. So we do rely on, Mr. Rozelle did indicate that he was an expert, and we relied on his expertise for that. So several of my precincts were short. So just a timeline of my election day, at 3:23 p.m., I deployed every ballot that I had to all the precincts. So any ballots that were at City Hall, which we had ballots that were delivered Monday evening, which I had not sealed my ballot containers yet, so those were in my ballot containers. And after that, I deployed all of my absentee ballots to the precincts. Furthermore, things began to get very hectic at 4:57 p.m. in my city. At that point, my staff opened up other offices within City Hall, and we started to print 8.5 by 11 move ballots. These are the ballots that we send to our civilians and military. So I had ballots that my election workers, my phone started ringing off the chain saying that we were down to our last pack. So in a sense of being proactive, we just started printing out move ballots in addition to all the other ballots that were deployed for every precinct in my city. So that's 36 precincts. I had police officers, I had our deputy city administrator, I had facilities, I had everyone deploying ballots. I do think that no one could have predicted this type of voter turnout. That's the first thing. We all couldn't have predicted this, but I think for anyone to get turned away for voting, and I'm fortunate in my community I didn't, because my lag time was 4 minutes, so no one turned away. But anyone to get turned away for not having a ballot is a miscarriage of democracy. So we don't want that at all. Our reputations are just as valuable as any one other reputations. You can ask any clerk from Zimbabwe to Southfield, Michigan, the worst nightmare that you will ever have is running out of ballots. No one wants to run out of ballots, from the director of election all the way down to the city clerks. I'm getting upset just thinking about running out of ballots. So that's something that you definitely don't want. So one of the things I'm looking forward to is just moving forward. I think oftentimes when you have adversity, you tend to come apart. This is a time for the county to unite, and a lot of people have been asking me across the country. Joe Rozelle and I were at a conference this week. How does Oakland County run out of ballots? And it's the second richest county in America. So those things, we just have to move forward, and we definitely just have to look at what happened here as and develop some best practices so that it won't continue to happen in the future. And one of the things I do want to talk about, which has been omitted thus far, with the number of spoiled ballots that we had as a county-wide, I think one of the things we didn't talk about was this was the first time that we had a third column with the Libertarian Party being on there. So even with the ballot instructions, most individuals thought that they can pick one, they will pick one as far as like Republican or Democrat and vote, and then they would go down the Libertarian line and also pick. So that attributed greatly to our spoiled ballots as well. Thank you.
Thank you. We're familiar with the move. Yes, thank you, thank you. We're somewhat prepared. No. Debbie Binder, West Bloomfield.
The clerk is coming forward. Can we make sure if anyone else wants to speak that they come forth and make sure they sign on the sheets?
Okay, Debbie Binder, West Bloomfield Township Clerk, and thank you for the opportunity, and thank you to the Board of Canvassers who were most helpful. So, to start with, this has become the local clerks versus the county and really should not be. Joe said we are in good hands, and we are. The county is responsive and helpful. Joe is outstanding. He is accessible, reliable, and extremely capable. Lisa truly values the sanctity of the election process and engagement of voters, and that needs to be understood overall. The elections have proven a well-oiled machine until there's an anomaly. This has created an opportunity for us to prepare better for the possible, not to deliberate or attribute fault. The numbers were there to account for an anomaly. There was a real numbers increase. By my calculations, there were 14,197 voters beyond the 25% more that voted in the election in 2010, which was the most similar due to a newly elected governor, not a re-election. Our AV responses were not indicative of the numbers we would have coming in on election day. We had a large number come in on election day that threw us over the top. We spoke with the county, and the county was helpful within their means. I've never had complaint with the county, and they've been responsive and wonderful all the time. It was a stressful election by all accounts, including my election specialist who's been there for 30 years. There were ballot shortages, equipment issues with the high-speed tabulator, the scanner failures in the field, and the customer support from the vendor was not what we would have expected. Again, the county was always responsive in trying to help intervene. Also important to remind people, the precinct workers are using skills that require precision and accuracy, and they're using those skills once or twice a year or every other year. And they do, it's not something that's well practiced. We were one of the communities who did not request more because the email did say do not increase these numbers, and we did what we were asked to do. If we had gone by our first issue of ballots, we would have been short in 18 out of 25 precincts. In the second issue, we would have been short in 10 out of 25 precincts. After taking the spoiled ballots and the ones that went in for duplicating to the AV board, we were short in 13 out of 25 precincts. We had paper there for the touch writer. It's not a solution. It's a Band-Aid at best. The inspector said all it did was shift the lines because the touch writer is not geared for mass production. What I would like to add also is the local clerks, their staffs, their election workers, and the election workers were all heroes that day. We made lemonades out of lemons. We made mistakes for sure. As one of the newer clerks, I'm sure I made more. Almost every error, though, and issue that we had could have been prevented with sufficient ballots. We all have a common goal, to conduct fair elections consistent with our democracy. We need to move forward with the common goal in mind and not get caught in the bipartisan tenor of this era. Again, I think the county cares. I think the county was responsive. I think this was an anomaly that could not have been prepared for. Over 14,000 additional voters in the county beyond the 25% more. Those are numbers that are hard to predict. We couldn't from ours, and I respect everybody that was involved in it and everybody that is stepping forward to speak, and I choose to be part of the solution, and again, value the county representatives who are here and work very diligently for the county as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura Moreau, Springfield Township Clerk.
Thank you for this opportunity. I'd like to speak just as a clerk who I did not run out of ballots, but I did feel that it was important to speak. I've been the clerk for almost 10 years, and in that entire time, Joe Roselle has been the Director of Elections, and it has been a great relationship. And first I want to start by just commenting that until the day after the election, I would have never thought that I would want to be part of a letter that kind of spoke out against what I saw happen. It's unfortunate, and well, none of us are here to point fingers, certainly, but unfortunately that's kind of what started the day after the election. And I took my afternoon off, to be away from the office at a time where I'm really busy to be here, and I know a couple of you commented on the tone. I was disappointed about the tone myself. I didn't think I was coming down here for a lecture, and I'm really disappointed in that. So I feel like I need to say that, and before I get to my comments. I'm talking about the first comments of the day. So I want to thank you for giving us this opportunity. I did respond to the survey. I took it very seriously. I have one of my election workers here, which I'm really proud about that. And I just wanted to let you know that I was one of the clerks who did not run. We needed the additional ballots that we received. And it was noted in the presentation that there were many clerks that they didn't hear from. I just want to make sure I'll speak on behalf of the clerks that didn't make that call. It wasn't because we weren't monitoring. It wasn't because we weren't aware that there was an increase and there was some concern about running out of ballots. We were aware of that. We got the email from Joe, and like many clerks, we have the utmost confidence in his expertise. We weren't aware of how many ballots we were going to get, and we weren't aware of which precincts were getting them until very late in the game. When we got them, we felt relatively confident we were going to be just fine, and as it turns out, we were, but we needed those. So I just want to say, don't take that as evidence that we were clueless, not aware, or not engaged, because we were. The other point I want to make is don't take as evidence that not all the ballots were delivered, or they weren't showing up on the ballot summary report or something like that, and some other clerks have already mentioned this. By the Monday afternoon, the day before the election, we're already setting up precincts. We're getting ready. They're already set up, and I believe Jan mentioned that we're also putting information in the electronic poll book. So we don't have the ability. So in the end, we have so many things that we're dealing with, and the stress and anxiety, and getting those ballots out at the last minute we did do that. Like many others who said, we instructed our chair people, when you open up that last pack, give us a call, and we did that. One of my precincts, I'm lucky I only have 7 precincts, but 1 through 5 got additional ballots. I never sent precinct 5 ballots out because we never needed them. So I just want you, as you're reviewing this information, to not use that as an indication that we were holding back ballots. We weren't aware that we had them. That was stated in the news. It was stated today, and I just want to make sure that it's clear. We sent out the ballots that we knew were needed. And I also, just real quick, I know my time is up, but it was also noted that that the clerks ran out of applications to vote, and that was an indication that we weren't prepared for the turnout. I do have an email where we asked for additional applications to vote, and we were told we're not getting any more additional applications to vote. So we were seeing this. We are detecting a desire on behalf of the county office to really be very fiscally conservative, which we applaud, but at the same time, that puts us in a difficult position, because I'm sitting there looking at leftover bits of stacks of applications to vote and figuring out how many I can stash in the different tubs that are being deployed out to the precinct. We need to be a little more realistic here about the supplies and the pinch that we're putting not only the local clerks in, but our chair people who are trying to do the best that they can on Election Day. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Barbara Pallotta, Independence Township.
I just want to start out by saying I'm a better writer than a speaker, just so you know. I'm the one that wrote the War and Peace version to your survey. I'd like to start out by saying that when I sent that to Commissioners Quarles and Berman, I also copied Joe Rosell on it because I wanted him to know how much I respect him and his staff, and that hasn't changed with any of us. I think you all need to be aware of that. Because I put everything in this War and Peace version, I want to kind of piggyback on what Laura said and the clerk from West Bloomfield said, that a lot of people have the perception that preparing for an election is a one-day event. We start out months before getting everything ready. Also, I think that it's important to acknowledge that, and I've worked in a lot of places. I've been doing this for 25 years. I'm lucky to say this is the end of the road for me. So I can speak freely, but I started in the city of Novi. I've worked for the city of Farmington Hills. I've worked for the city of Wixom. I worked for the city of Troy, and now I'm the township clerk and elected in Independence Township, which gives me more of a voice. I'm more known for not saying much, but when I say something, the people I work with on that board say we really do listen, so I hope you listen today. What I've learned from working in all these communities, the resources are different. The dynamics of the office are different. People in the clerk's office don't tend to stay. It really takes a certain personality to work in the clerk's office. And every clerk in this room, the one thing we have in common is we're type A and we pay attention to detail. So I know that that's how it is in the elections office at Oakland County. So having said that, we're a very tight group. We communicate with each other and we cover each other's backs. But I will say that this ballot situation is just it's just one problem of a bigger picture, and that is what I included in my report to you. And the good thing is, though, it's the easiest thing to fix because it's the one thing you can throw money at and it's fixed. All these other things, I could raise the salaries for my election inspectors, which I have. I could pay for their lunches, which I've done that. I've done multiple things, but that doesn't attract qualified people at our precinct. Interestingly enough, I took all the ages of our election inspectors, and we're lucky now because now we have some high school students. And the average age of our election inspectors is 60 years old. I'm going to be 65 this year, and let me tell you, I'm like pooped. So it's a long day on election day, and we're very lucky to have who we have, and I have 3 of my workers here today, which I'm glad they're here. And I just want to say that it's more complicated than I can even explain at this podium. I've had several of our board members work at our precincts, and they have even said they had no idea. Everybody that works in our office to help us for elections, they say the very same thing. I had no idea what went into conducting an election. So I don't want to simplify this as something being some kind of conflict between us. That is not the case. We are there for each other, and I just want to make it clear that I didn't sign the letter for Lisa for Board of Commissioners because I don't feel that's my battle. My battle is with my own board, and I would never ask someone to, like an election inspector, to go to my board for that. But it's not that I don't support it, because I do. I think that that's an easy fix for us, and that will take care of that stress element that we have to face. In all the years I've been doing this, we ran out of ballots. One other time, it was a 2005 special election for Clarkston schools who were trying to get new iPads. And that was the only election we ever ran out of ballots, and it was the worst day of my life. So having said that, I want to thank you again. I hope that you do. I'm lucky I didn't have it that bad, but I did feel the stress all day. And so read my book, and I'll give you a signed copy.
Thank you.
if
We have it.
But thank you so much for giving us this opportunity to come before you. I never thought I'd talk this long because I wasn't planning on it, but thank you.
Thank you. Debbie Miller, Rose Township. I think it's Miller.
Good afternoon. I think I'm the last one, so I'll make it short and sweet.
We have one more.
Oh, okay, I won't take too long. But I just want to talk about
We'll accept short and sweet.
I will make it short and sweet. I just wanted to talk about my election. I had a 33% turnout, which is high. My normal is 18 to 20% for a election in August. I didn't have a ballot issue. I did not run out of ballots. I was watching it very closely, and I make sure that I deliver all my ballots to my precincts the morning of the election. So they had every single ballot that was in my office. But I also talked to Joe. He was very gracious. I let him know, hey, I'm dipping into my precinct ballots. I'm going to need some more. Within 2 weeks, I got another 100 ballots for each of my precincts. I ordered the paper from PSI for my TouchWriter printer, so I didn't have that issue if I did run out of ballots in the precincts. I've also been, you were talking about money for recruiting people. I go to Holly High School every 2 years, and I recruit high school students. I take up a class, my deputy and I, we take up a class for the AP government students, and those are my precinct inspectors. I also have them now in college. They come back to work the elections for me, and the new high school students. They're 16 and 17. Also, my election inspectors, they run from 16 years old to 82 years old. So mainly my older inspectors are at the AV County Board. So I've been doing that for the last 6 years. What I wanted to mention was, I didn't have an election problem. I didn't have a ballot problem. I appreciate everybody that was here to discuss theirs. But I also filled out my survey, and what I wrote on there was, how responsive was the county clerk, the election division? And I said, the Oakland County Elections Division is the most professional, top-notch in the state and probably the entire country. These people work very hard and should be commended for the excellent work they perform every day. That's Lisa, Joe, and all of you. Thank you very much for all of your hard work. I appreciate it. And without you guys, we would never make it. And the other thing is, looking forward to future elections, what suggestions do you have for improvement? I said, my only suggestion is that you have sufficient funds in your budget for 2020 for the August primary, because I think it's going to be a lot busier than this August one. So if you could tell the Finance Committee to, I said budget another $200,000 for 100% of your ballots. And Joe, you've always been so gracious. You come out and train my election inspectors so they don't have to drive all the way in here, because a lot of them are students. And I appreciate that. I commend you. You're my hero. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Look at that timing. John Spates, Troy.
Good afternoon. Thank you for the privilege of speaking. I'm a precinct captain, so I'm way down the chain from where everything happens. So I ran out of ballots. It was an interesting process to go through, and I understand only a little bit of what most city clerks go through. I appreciate the time that Joe took today to explain the calculations that he went through. I did not know it was to that degree, and you do have to have a crystal ball. So if I had any choice of what to say to do things differently or better, is to have the precincts, the election workers, I should say, understand a little bit more. Maybe vetting of those particular individuals so that they understand more of what they have to go through. It's a little bit of a challenge because we're trusting that people like myself know exactly what to do. And I don't know that they do all the time. So with that, thank you very much.
Thank you. So we jumped into our final agenda item, which is to hear from election workers prior to public comment. So I think just for formality purposes, I have a motion from Commissioner Quarles and supported by Commissioner Gershenson. All in favor, aye. And we can retroactively apply that prior to that last speaker. Next on our list is potentially Beverly, what is this? McCreaky, Brandon Township.
So mine is not a ballot issue. Mine is an equipment issue that maybe Joe can answer. Did you see my comments on it? I'm going to use hypothetical numbers because I'm not sure that you all know how the election process actually works. But we have an electronic poll book that we enter the voters into. And let's say at one point we had 100 voters, so voter number 100 is the last one entered in, and our poll book crashed. So we called for tech support and we immediately went to using the old-fashioned paper method, which meant we had to pull up the hard copy of the registered voters, and then we had to use the old-fashioned paper poll book that's provided for emergencies, and we entered, let's say, 60 voters. Tech person fixes the problem and we bring the computer back up. The problem now is we have 160 voters who have been issued ballots, but the computer will not allow us to issue a voter number other than 101. So what we had to do then was ask our voters to be patient and wait while we took every one of those 60 voters that we issued by hand and we entered them into the computer, which was okay because it was maybe I have an outstanding crew and we did maybe 10 minutes and we got them issued. In the meantime, our other workers brought out all our little goodies from the lunchroom and we passed them around and I explained what was happening and our voters were very good about it. But had we been down for a couple of hours, we would have had a very large number of voters to enter in that e-poll book before we could start processing voters. It would have been a much longer wait. So if there's a way to manipulate that voter number, I don't know about it, and I don't think the clerk does, but in that kind of a situation, what would we have done other than to grab that poll book and have someone assigned, like we actually had extra workers, and start entering all of those people as we're still hand issuing and playing catch up. And we would have to continue to hand issue and someone else would have to be trying to enter. So there needs to be some way that that equipment, that program can be changed so that in an emergency situation like that, we can change that voter number. Would have to try and play catch up. Right, because what would happen is that the computer would now issue a ballot to voter 101, but we've already issued a ballot to 101, all the way through 160.
Well, yeah,
We'll share
so
your
thank
concerns
you very much for your comments. We're gonna.
I just want to say one other thing too. In 12 years as clerk for Brandon Township, I'm retired now, the best thing that ever happened as clerk was the day that they hired Joe to be the elections director. He's amazing.
Thank you for your comments. Now, I'd be remiss if I failed to acknowledge, well, she just stepped out, but our Secretary of State, Ruth Johnson, is here. So hopefully we can say hi to her again. Let's see, next on our list is, and I don't want to butcher your last name, so I'm going to say Jan from Novi.
Don't worry about it, everyone does.
And if, for the record, you can pronounce your last name for us, please.
I'm Jan Leon Wozniak. You have my sympathies. Commissioners, I stand before you as the voice of the person who was on the front line the day that all of this happened. I'm a precinct chair, and as a chair, I take that responsibility very seriously. I'm going to read you the last line of a poem. At 6 p.m., I personally spent 90 minutes printing out 60 ballots so we would not face the most embarrassing situation, and that is telling our voters that we ran out of ballots. All right, I sat at the touch writer. For all of you that know a touch writer, that's not fun because there's a blue button in the back that you have to press every single time. I faked it out. I pretended I was voting for one party. I skipped everything and was able to print 60 ballots. To put that in perspective, at 10 o'clock, I called the clerk and said, we're going to run out of ballots. The clerk said, yes, we know that. She sent over, kindly, 41 unused absentee ballots. I said, that's not going to be enough. She said, I know that. We got 100 ballots from the county in the cellophane envelope. I said, that's not going to be enough. We got 20 or so test ballots from the city clerk. I said, that's still not going to be enough. So I spent the time from 6 p.m. to almost 8 o'clock printing out those ballots, and we were left with 20 left
Sir,
over.
you need to speak into the mic.
I'm sorry.
Thank you.
The total for the day was 502. I believe in analytics. I went back and I've taken a look at the 2010 election online. I've taken a look at the 2014. 2014, 236 voters came through the precinct. We had 502. Simple math tells you that's more than 100%. There has been allusion to the fact that perhaps the precinct workers were the problem. A comment was made. City election officials printed more than enough ballots on previous election turnouts. Under state law, there's a formula for calculating the number of ballots we'd need, and we padded that, but it fell short. I believe there was a lack of voter instruction here. These are the comments that made the Free Press that very same day, all right, in the night, and those are the kinds of comments that kill us, all right? In business, we have contingency management. We have crisis management. We should have known, because of the blue wave, because of the words diversity, inclusion, incumbent targeting, everything was there for 6 months, that this was going to be the most incredible election that we had ever seen. And I wish that everyone had heeded what the clerks had to say.
Thank you.
As far as train,
Oh, if you could just wrap up, please, so everybody
I'm
has
gonna
an
make
opportunity.
One point. As far as training is concerned, both of the clerks that I've worked for put us through an inordinate amount of training. And I speak on behalf of all the people that are there. We feel we're trained. If there were mistakes, yes, we make mistakes. But it's our business. We care about it.
Thank you very much. Well, it looks like Richard Petroselli, West Bloomfield Township.
Richard Petrocelli, like the old TV show.
Thank you. Apologize.
I have nothing to add. I think there have been some eloquent testimonies here today about what took place, why it took place, and some of this and that. And I'm pleased that the townships, the county, the state seems to be very
Just
concerned
pull the mic down, sir. Pull the mic down.
Is that better?
Yes, thank you.
Shorty like me should have known that. I'm pleased that what we're doing is what we're doing. And that's probably all that we can do. And I don't want to be superfluous and add to what was added or talked about here today, but I do want to, I ran across two quotes recently that speak to a broader issue about our electoral process by former Attorney General Eric Holder. Just two quotes. Unregulated dark money combined with voter ID laws, combined with gerrymandering, is not the way our system is supposed to work. Second quote. a well-financed minority that has views inconsistent with the vast majority of American people runs this country. We're doing what we can here. I hope to hell that somebody in the country addresses that broader issue that Holder's talking about. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments. Lastly, we have Bruce. Come on up. I think we would prefer to have you come to the podium. Thank you. We'll work with you.
All right. I'm going to put 3 minutes and then I'll go from there. Okay, so first I want to thank you for putting this committee together. I think it's really important. As I mentioned, I did work as an election worker in Rochester Hills. We came within 3 ballots of running out. We had 600 ballots. We used 597 of our 600 ballots. So I've been involved in the election concerns for a while. I'm the communications director for the Michigan Election Reform Alliance, so this is something we've been studying, not this particular issue, but elections for over a decade. So when this happened in my precinct, I was very concerned. I've had a couple of conversations with my clerk, and I took the time to FOIA several cities for their communications with the clerk's office. And I think there's quite a bit different story than Joe outlined. And I just want to read a few of the comments that I got from the emails. I've gone through all of them. I got FOIAs from, I believe, 5 cities, because this is a big concern to me, and I've taken the time to go through with them. So I'll just read some of the emails that I got that I'm concerned about, pointing out the issues, as I believe Mr. Rozell did. Some of them will just be sentences from an email, and I'm not, just so for time's sake. One clerk in her email, can I order more absentee ballots through PSI and just pay for them myself? So obviously she's having a concern with all, I don't have a date on this, but obviously well before the election. They're even willing to pay for the ballots themselves, and I guess because the contract with PSI, the ballot printer, is through the county, they are not apparently allowed to do that. This one is July 25th. Thank you, Joe. I'm really concerned that we're going to run out the precincts if we do not have more ordered. Our AVs are up almost 500 ballots compared to the 8-2-16 primary. This is another one. I don't know if I have time to read it all, but there were several precincts in the same city where this clerk was concerned with having enough ballots. And this was on August 6th. So also, this is from another clerk. I'm attaching my latest numbers, and so she was concerned also. This is in Rochester Hills. This is from July 18. Precinct 10 had already used 185 of 200 ballots. Precinct 24 had already used 360 out of 400. Precinct 26 had used 375 out of 400. So this was not a problem that we couldn't see coming down the road. This is, let's see. And I also believe there were a lot of communication problems. It looks, by my reading, that there were emails being sent to the clerk's office where people were asking for more ballots, and it looks like, from my reading anyway, I could be wrong, that they were not being responded to, or they were given a response like, okay, we got the message, but not a specific response saying we're going to take care of it and this is how we're going to take care of it. This is another clerk. I have an issue with the ballot quantities allotted for me. When I went to training, they said to base order on 2010. I have a precinct in 2010 that ordered, the voter turnout was 41%, and that and 9, that ranged between 23 and 28. I have the percentages per precinct if you need them. Some of my precinct allotments are 22%. In addition, we reached out to residents, increased our permanent AV substantially. So I guess what I'm, for time's sake, I want to say this is not a train we didn't see coming down the road. It sounds like there are a lot of safeguards that have been put in place, but we need to do more. If even one voter gets turned away at the precinct, for voting, or if they're not they're necessarily even turned away, but if they're told, hey, look, we have to wait, we have ballots on the way. I know I've spoken to Tina several times, and they were running around on election night. I believe, if I have this correct, and Tina can correct me if I'm wrong, they had to come out here, pick up ballots, and then drive ballots on election night in rush hour to the different precincts. My precinct where I worked, we called the clerk's office 3 separate times asking for more ballots. And like I said, we came within 3 of running out. And we were literally praying that we weren't going to have a rush at 5 minutes to 8, then we were going to run out of ballots. So I think.
So I split the difference with you.
Is it where am I at?
You're 30 seconds to go.
From 5
From the-
5 minutes? From 3 minutes or 5 minutes or 6 minutes? Okay, well, I guess to finish up.
You're 5 in.
Okay, to finish up, this was something we should have seen coming. I know Tina looked at her information in July and was very concerned in July when we could have easily taken care of this problem had we just ordered more ballots for our precinct workers. So I hope you'll solve this problem. I don't want to necessarily point fingers, but this needs to be solved, and it needs to be solved on an ongoing basis, not just for one election going forward. Thank you.
Thank you for your dual comments. Because we only have one public comment, we'll go to public comment. I know we talked about revisiting the clerk and allowing the clerk to have. Sure. Can we have the one public comment? Can you wait and allow? Let's do that first, please. So we have Mary Bauer from Clarkston.
We'll see if that microphone goes down far enough.
I've been up there, so it should.
Hi, my name is Mary Bauer. I've been an election precinct worker in Oakland County since 1976, so over 40 years. So I'm bringing a voter and basic precinct worker point of view. And this is not the first time we've run out of ballots. I know of at least 3 times. So I didn't get particularly flapped. It's happened before. It'll happen again. That being said, there's been a lot of talk about waste. Disenfranchising even one voter because they had to leave a line, because they had to go pick up kids, feed their family, get to work, that's unacceptable. Yes, it costs a lot of tax dollars. And trust me, they're my tax dollars too. That's important. But we need to vote in this country. We don't need to discourage voters. But I think it will help if you guys tell people in the paper, online, in the newspaper, however you want to do it, exactly how much those ballots cost, why you order the percentages you do, that you're mandated to order certain percentages. Most voters don't understand this. I've been working for over 40 years, and I didn't understand that you had a formula to decide on how many ballots. Tell people. They'll be less angry afterwards if you tell them the facts first. Also, we need a proper procedure for handling those duplicated ballots. There needs to be put in place written instructions for how we handle those, just like there's written instructions for how we handle used, unused, and spoiled ballots going back to the precinct. The election workers need to be trained in that. And everybody has been talking about needing a crystal ball. I don't think you did. We were not the first state in the union to vote, and every single state that voted ahead of us had a massive surge in voter turnout. You don't wait until the flood knocks down your front door to realize there's a flood coming. Even on Sunday in Michigan Matters, the state clerk, Ruth Johnson, mentioned that she expected a very high turnout. I think that has to be put into those factors of how you decide how many ballots. We need a new privacy envelope because handling that, getting the ballot out of the privacy envelope, and also relative inexperience in voting were 2 of the factors that led to a lot of spoilage. We saw a lot of voters that we normally only see at presidentials, and we saw a lot of first-time voters. And that's part of the factor for spoilage. I don't think it was just election precinct workers not instructing them correctly. I think another factor was the icons at the top of each column were eliminated, and I was told in training when I objected to that it was to save space on the ballot. We already went over onto the back of the ballot. You were already using up the space. It may not matter to us, but to a voter of low literacy, they may locate the right column by looking at the icon. And that speeds up their vote when they can find that icon quickly, and it makes for a more correct vote if they can find the right column quickly. Okay.
And if you could just make this your final comment, please.
Yeah.
Thank you.
I think in recruiting new precinct workers, going out to high schools is a fine idea. But I think we need to get out to the public more that they're paid and that it's an important civic duty. I think we also need to put a video online at our local cable channels and at our local government sites on how to handle voting in the tabulator and how to handle the privacy envelope. And I think we ought to have a standing board just outside the precinct with one of those little swipe your smartphone icons so that people in line can watch that video and get a quick refresh of how to do it so that we precinct workers don't have to tell them every time. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you
Commissioner.
for your comments.
Just I want to clarify, I appreciate the lady's comments. Just to clarify though, the vignettes or the icons, those are removed by the legislature shortly after they eliminated straight party voting. When the federal court put back straight party voting, they did not put back the vignettes. So those were, it was not a decision made locally, that was made at the legislature.
But we need to push for it back because we do have voters who aren't literate who are voting.
All right, thank you for your comments and thanks for the clarification. So I know, let's take a 2-minute recess. Thank you. an opportunity to respond to some of the comments that they've had a chance to hear today.
Thank you. Well, I know I clarified this with you during the potty break, and thank you for that. My bladder thanks you. Can't hear me? I did want to comment on one thing that Bruce said about a local clerk that had requested to Joe, can we order more ballots and we'll pay for them themselves. You know, state law is a state law, and the state law says that the county pays. So that's why that would have been met with a no, because they can't pay. I think we would love it, and you commissioners would probably love it too. It would help with the budget. But so that's the answer to that question. What else?
I would just say that, you know, you heard a lot of passionate comments from our clerks and our colleagues in this process. They obviously feel very strongly, as do we. And so I'm looking forward to, you know, working with the committee and working with these clerks, getting, you know, that appropriation as maybe part of this solution so that we don't have to encounter, you know, this in the future. You heard a lot of talk about turnout, and a lot of clerks talked about sometimes 2.5, 3 times turnout in their community. And we did set the state record for congressional turnout. As long as Michigan has been a state, Oakland County now holds the distinction of having the largest congressional turnout in state history. So there was a lot of firsts. We also had more first-time voters in this election than any election since that's been measured in the qualified voter file, which is mid-90s. So there were a lot of firsts, a lot of things, folks you heard mention anomalies. There were a lot of anomalies, but and we're committed to working together, as Commissioner Kokendorfer mentioned, and I want to just assure you that these folks are very competent, very qualified, and we're going to continue to work together as we always have to address this into the future.
And I guess I'll add, you know, as far as Joe and I starting off, and I did say this, but we both felt that our integrity was questioned, and we both took that very personally, and so we were defensive. That doesn't stop us from moving forward, from working together. As I said, I think we've all worked together very well. I mean, Joe's been doing this longer than I have, but I do consider many of the local clerks friends as well. And you know, it's regretful that we have hurt feelings. Nobody would have wanted this to happen by any means. And I want to do whatever I can in my power to ensure that it doesn't happen again. And you know, I know that if we have that money, like I said, to take that stress away from our local clerks, I think would be tremendous. I mean, believe me, there's plenty of other things that I know that they're going to worry about. You know, if poll workers, if somebody gets sick, and I mean, there's a list of things, but to have that be one less thing to worry about, and really for all of us. And I think some of the public comment of, you know, the cost of, really it's the cost of democracy. Like, what is somebody's vote worth? And you can't put a price tag on that. So thank you. And thank you for this forum. Thank you for your thoughtfulness and your questions and wanting to learn more. And Chris for educating so much. And for everybody else to come and share their thoughts as well. And I do want to give a special kudos to my staff, because I know they also feel they have been under a lot as well. And I know they got some kudos too, but I want to give them kudos. They work very long days and nights, as I know all of our local clerks do, but I do think they're the best. And our Board of Canvassers too, because they put in, we got down to the wire. There was a lot to go through. That was probably, I know, the most stressful one that since I've been here, that they almost have to be detectives to try and figure some of this stuff out. And for the poll workers who give great comments and remarks, that is invaluable. I can't tell you, and that's wonderful. I wish that everybody did that. That's helpful. But they put in like a lot of hours, and I want to thank them as well. So, but I don't want to have hurt feelings with any of the local clerks. We've got a big election coming up, and you know, we still have a lot of work to do together, and I look forward to doing that. Thank you.
Thank you. And if take this time now for my fellow committee members to make any final comments and/or ask any final questions that you may have. If you want to start, Marcia.
Well, it was so informative. I really learned so much, and I took a list of things that I think could help make our system better. I work very closely with those folks that are sitting over there. I count on them as well as Joe and Lisa. I think we all have that same amount of trust in this department. There just are some things I think that we really can make better, and I want you to have faith in this committee that we're all committed to making some really good suggestions, and so that hopefully this doesn't happen again.
Adam.
No, I was just going to say.
Commissioner Kolkendorfer.
Adam. Again, thank you very much to everybody who participated here in this room. I just want to stress again, everybody that's here, I really believe we all had the exact same goal in mind, every single one. This has been referred to as a bipartisan committee. I think it was nonpartisan. There isn't anything partisan about making sure that everybody has the right to vote, no one's disenfranchised, and no one's standing there for 40 minutes at a time. And I do think there are some things that we can all improve together. This committee has been diligent, will continue to diligently work on this. I personally learned a lot today, and thank everybody here for helping to educate us.
One group I didn't thank was our staff, the Board of Commissioners staff, Mike, Tracy, and Chris, who I think now has a cot here, doesn't go home. But our staff, in compiling all the responses that we got
In
and
the
trying
short
to
period of time.
analyze, and we have been under a time crunch. So I just want to be sure and acknowledge our staff as well.
Yes, thank you. And so as opposed to reiterating, I will echo those sentiments from both of my colleague commissioners. And, I just, again, want to thank everybody for being here. Really appreciate the time, the effort, and, this has been very informative. Personally, I learned a lot today. And, we have a lot of information to get through that has been submitted to us by you and others not here today, along with everything that we learned today. We're going to have our next hearing, or forum, let's call it, public forum, on September 12th. I know Commissioner Quarles mentioned that at the city of, Township of Southfield, City of Southfield offices, and then we will have a final meeting here to compile kind of our recommendations moving forward to the Oakland, to our board and the clerk's office. So thank you. Last, we have communications on our agenda. We have a few communications to receive and file, and there was an additional one. I need a motion to receive and file. Motion by Commissioner Gershenson, support by Commissioner Kolkendorfer. All in favor, voice vote. Aye. And those should be received and filed. We do not have any other business, so this meeting today is adjourned. Thank you.